Hi there. Thanks for joining me this evening. I have some good news as our guest who is going to be here to give us a tactful talk on the escalating tensions. He couldn't make it, so we'll not have to be so encumbered with being tactful. Yay! Seriously though, he's a great guy, Joshua Gilpin. If you're out District 1, you know him. I'll try to have him back another time. But I do want to talk to you a little about the escalating tension from a different perspective. And I am going to read a bit. Be patient with me. I'm not going to read a whole lot. It's just I want to share with you a couple of my favorite passages here from the law and talk about how I think it plays into where we are right now. So this French guy wrote a book in 1850, and I think it matters today, is basically what I'm saying. So this first bit is important. And what he's trying to do here is he's trying to establish what the law is. And this is important to us today because in some ways we're at conflict with the law. It's not just law enforcement, it's the law. And I think as we go through this, you'll see that. So then, nature, or rather God, has bestowed upon every one of us the right to defend his person, his liberty, and his property. Since these three constituent or preserving elements of life. I flubbed that. These three are the constituent or preserving elements of life. So what he's saying there is we're either talking about life or we're talking about that which preserves your life. You have to have the right to defend your life. You have to have the right to keep the products of your industry. You have to keep, if you make food for yourself, you have to have the right to keep that food. Whatever it is you are doing to survive, whatever it is you're making for yourself, your family, your spouse, you have to be able to hang on to that. Likewise, if you don't have the right to defend your life, you won't hang on to your life. And in fact, all of this is around the word defend. It's not that you have the right to these things, you do, but he's saying you have the right to defend them. So the next bit is if every man has the right of defending, even by force, his person, his liberty, and his property, a number of men have the right to combine together, to extend, to organize a common force to provide regularly for this defense. This is the foundation of the law, as Bastiat sees it. So why do we have law enforcement? Why do we have a law at all? It's for preserving these things, and that encompasses the common defense, i.e., the military. It includes whatever it is we're doing as a team, as a society, to be able to defend our life, our liberty, our property. So this next one split across a couple of pages. By the way, if you want to get this PDF, you can get it free from, I think it's Mises.org, but you can just Google the law. Thus, as the force of an individual cannot lawfully touch the person, the liberty, or the property of another individual, for the same reason, the common force cannot lawfully be used to destroy the person, the liberty, or the property of another individual or of a class, or of classes. So what he's saying here, I think it's obvious, but just like I don't have the right to punch you or take your property or take your life, it really doesn't matter how many friends I have that all come together in agreement. I still don't have the rights to take any of those things from you. We don't gain collectively a new right. And I have one more, and then we'll cut it out with the reading for a while. But this one's, uh-oh. I've lost it. I will never, ever find it again. It's a big one. It is easy to conceive, we might not read it all. It is easy to conceive that according to the power of the legislator, it destroys for its own profit and in different degrees among the rest of the community, personal independence by slavery, liberty by oppression. Sorry. I've never been that good at reading out loud. I read in my head. I don't think in words. I've mentioned this to you. I think spatially. So this is actually, I know that's a weird thing, but it is actually slightly challenging for me. And in different degrees amongst the rest of the community, personal independence by slavery, liberty by oppression, and property by plunder. So what he's saying here is it's easy to understand that once people gain power, they're going to abuse it. And I'm not going to torture you with listening to more of my reading. The really interesting part, though, is they're talking about, excuse me, Bastiat is talking about the people who feel disenfranchised from this, in turn, try to gain power. And in trying to gain power, once they do, they're left with two options. They're either going to put an end to lawful plunder, or they are going to desire to take part of it. Now, I'm torturing you with all this because this really plays into what's going on today in a really important way. And he ends with, woe to the nation where this latter thought prevails amongst the masses at the moment when they are in their turn seize upon the legislative power. So in other words, hey, if you live in a nation where when the people take power, they go, yes, it is our turn. Now we will take part in the plunder. Then you are in a bad situation. And that doesn't have to be as ominous as it sounds. It doesn't have to be people really intending harm. It can be as simple as, well, when they were in power, they overturned citizens' rights to do what they thought was right. So now that we're in power, why wouldn't we do the same? I mean, what is with the argument? You know, they're saying, oh, no, we don't have the right to do this. We don't have the right to do that. But they did it before. They did it before for their people. What's wrong with us doing it now for our people? And the problem with that is it's ever escalating. So what is the problem? How does this relate to what's going on right now? And my opinion on this is that the state has too much power. It has too much power, and it has too much immunity to the consequences of its actions. So, and we see and hear all these horror stories. It's not that there's that many police officers who want to get in a couple of extra punches when they're arresting someone. But if it's a police officer who does, they can probably get away with it. And that is the heart of the problem. And, you know, we've seen these on social media. You'll see them talking about shooting dogs. That was a thing a year or so ago on social media. And I really don't think there's that many police officers going around who wants to shoot your dog. But for the ones that do, they can probably get away with it. And you have the same thing with the discussion of kneeling on the back of your neck or kneeling on your neck. There's just not many people out there who are going to want to do that. But the problem is this particular one thought he could get away with it. And why would you do that? I think that's important to consider. He was kneeling on George Floyd's neck for 4 minutes after the man was motionless. Why? Well, I think the reason people commit such acts is about domination. And for me, that goes back to a personal story, not of me being dominated, actually, but I was in a pawn shop that was in the basement of a state trooper's house. And I'd heard you could get really good deals there. And I was looking and listening. And a friend of mine was engaged in conversation over prices. And this guy's buddies would come in with equipment that they had essentially stolen off teenagers, fuzz busters, things like that. And the way they did this is they, especially with radar detectors, they would claim they were illegal, which they weren't in Kentucky, but they would claim they were. And what's a 17 or 18-year-old kid going to do? But this wasn't about money entirely, because they took great joy in it. I mean, the reason I knew about this was they took great joy in it. If they hadn't took joy in it, I wouldn't have known about it. One of them would have just handed the equipment to the other, and that would have been the end of it. But instead, what I got is I got this happy banner about either how stupid the kid was or like he could do anything about it. Those group of people we don't want in law enforcement. And honestly, I think most law enforcement officers don't want them in law enforcement either. So back to George Floyd. Was he dominating George Floyd? George Floyd was out of it. And I think the guy kneeling on his neck knew that. You can tell when someone goes limp. I think it was the onlookers, honestly. The onlookers who were begging and pleading for him to get off. He was dominating them. This essentially, I mean, you could label it as terrorism. I would be more okay with labeling that terrorism than people who are labeling burning down Target as terrorism. Burning down Target was looting. It was vandalism. It's a horrible thing, but it's not terrorism. I don't think you're meaning to scare anyone when you and your buddies are holding some people at bay, threatening them, making sure they know they can't do anything about it, while you slowly murder someone. That's domination. That is absolutely domination. And I think they wanted them to be afraid. And that, to me, meets the definition of terrorism. They were trying to invoke terror in a group of people. So where did this power come from? I think this is important to consider, because to solve a problem, you often have to know its source. And the source of this power is we, the people. It came from us. We mandate that they keep us safe. That's why I was reading you those passages. The impetus of the law is still the idea of us coming together to work together to commonly defend our rights. And as perverted as it seems at this moment in time, that's still where it's from. But that's always been abused. It's always been, the dragon over the hill, or those people, whoever those people are. And I think that's a huge part of how we got to where we are now, which is the war on drugs. The war on drugs was not about drugs. The war on drugs, and let me share this with you. Whoops. The war on drugs was about associating the hippies with marijuana and the blacks with heroin. Sorry. Because you can't make laws against hippies or blacks. That won't happen. But what you can do is you can convince the community that there's a strong association between the hippies and the marijuana and the blacks and the heroin. And then you can criminalize the heck out of both. And because of that, they could arrest the leaders, they could raid their homes, they could break up their meetings, and they could vilify them night after night on evening news. Yes, I'm reading again. That's where this comes from. They sold, well, not me, it was before I was born, but they sold our parents and our grandparents on this narrative that these scary people, you need to be kept safe from these scary people. And that's what they did to gain this power. And this is why we have things like no-knock raids. They can break into your house with you in it without giving you any prior warning. Why would they be able to do that? They can do that to keep you safe from hippies and blacks. Do you feel safe? Does that make you feel safer? It doesn't make me feel safer. That is where that comes from. And this is where we are today. It's just escalating. And you have the people blaming it on Antifa, you know, the far left. You have people blaming it not the death, not the protests, but the looting, the violence. They blame it on the far left. They blame it on the far right. Some of it, maybe, but overall, this is dragons over the hill. And what isn't dragons over the hill is some radicals who are fed up with being stepped on. And the people who are stepping on them is us. We're the ones that keep empowering this to keep us safe from the hippies and the blacks. So I have a bit of a call to action for you. Oh, sorry. One more thing I wanted to show you. This happened just while I was getting ready for this. Is we have Trump threatening to deploy the military to states to curb the protest. So what is the solution? What is the solution to this too much violence? More violence, more force. That'll fix it, because it's worked so well for the last 40 years, hasn't it? So I have a call to action tonight. Let me find my banners here. I want you to find a candidate, just one. Find a candidate who believes in putting power back to the people. Find a candidate who isn't preaching about the dragons over the hill so that they can grab more power from you. You know, somebody who wants to make you free. Somebody who isn't telling you they're going to save you from drugs. If anything, they're going to save you from the war on drugs. Someone who believes you can make decisions for themselves. So you can find a whole slew of them on my candidates page. There's several running for Kentucky offices. There is, of course, me. I discount myself too often. I know that. Feel free to send me money, or, you know, hopefully soon we might be able to go visit neighborhoods. Let me know if you're interested in being part of Boots on the Ground. I do have up ballot candidates. There is, of course, Brad Barron. You can also find him on my page. And then not on my page, but let me just put it here real quick. There is, of course, let me get back to comments. There is, of course, our presidential candidate, Jo Jorgensen, and she is also against the war on drugs, and she is also against civil asset forfeiture. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to go pick a candidate who believes in empowering you. Can be me, can be another one. I don't care. We have to continue this message of peace. We have to continue a message of disempowering the government. We have to continue the message of making the government accountable for the damage they do. And we have to return the power to the people. That's all I have for you tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to have David Watson. David Watson is running for constable in Marshall County, which to me sounded like a hilarious joke, but nobody else found it funny. Dave's a, excuse me. Dave's a really great guy I've known for about half a decade. So join me tomorrow, and Dave's going to talk. I need to get the notes from him better, but basically me and Dave are going to talk about making law enforcement more friendly, more personable. And if you know David Watson, yeah, that's going to be easy sell. That's just who he is. So thanks for joining. I will see you tomorrow. Have a good night.